We're really excited about this year's Fanhita and the themes that we have laid out. The major focus for us this year is to get more community involvement. We got a fantastic lineup, a lot of excellent experts that are here to share their experience and their knowledge with you. He remains a strong advocate for equity, culture, and island sustainability. Please help me in welcome Lieutenant Governor Joshua F. Tenorio.
Thank you for providing me this opportunity to share my perspective on our decolonization efforts and the path we must pursue. This morning, I'm going to discuss Guam's past efforts to address its complicated political relationship with the United States, what I perceive to be Guam's place in the world, the current challenges to the global world order and rule of law as it affects our island, and the need to widen community interest and concern for Guam's future. My interest and involvement in Guam's political status started when I was a 15-year-old student in high school, like these students down here, back in 1989, and first elected to the Guam Youth Congress. I attended a congressional field hearing in Hawaii on the Draft Commonwealth Act, and then a national conference on political status in the territories in Washington the following year as part of my responsibilities. It was a wonderful opportunity for a young mind. And at that time, the whole of the government of Guam and its political leadership was in pursuit of U.S. congressional adoption of the Draft Guam Commonwealth Act. Significant effort was being led by Governor Joseph Atta as a bipartisan issue with the Guam legislature as full partners. This was an unprecedented movement initiated during Governor Ricky Berdalio's second term, resulting from the defeat of the Guam Constitution and a series of referendums and plebiscites that delivered a mandate from Guam voters. Commonwealth was an enhanced interim status, meant to be a bridge to the full exercise of self-determination. The movement was impressive and quite sophisticated, and the brightest minds were assembled to participate in a very focused and long-term engagement with numerous federal authorities. Governor Joseph Atta and the Guam Commission on Self-Determination, with representatives from all three branches of government, the Mayor's Council and the general public, led a coordinated effort to pursue discussions with President George H.W. Bush's Departments of Justice and Interior. Despite a series of structured engagements encouraged by the Congress and considerable effort spent by the Commission on behalf of GovGuam, the Bush administration task force on Guam, known as BADFOG, ended up issuing a series of reports that countered the legality of the Commonwealth Act's provisions approved by Guam voters. There was a general view that any progress in discussions was essentially reversed with the issuance of those reports. Guam's role in national defense also began changing, beginning with the Base Realignment and Closure Commission in the early 90s, the Naval Air Station, the Ship Repair Facility, the Naval Supply Depot, and Marine encampments had been restructured and closed. Assets were returned to the government of Guam, and the Guam International Airport Authority was able to significantly expand to support Guam's flourishing tourism economy. Landowners in some parts of Tizen received property that had previously been intended for the Guam Economic Development Authority to develop prior to the Ancestral Lands Act. Other assets were given to Guam to enable private sector operations for ship repair and port activities. The effort to pursue Commonwealth status was renewed by Governor Carl Gutierrez as he led an aggressive push to continue discussions with the same federal departments, but this time under the Clinton administration. President Clinton even appointed a presidential negotiator for the status of Guam in John Garamendi, who was eventually elected and still serves in the US Congress. Governor Gutierrez sought to utilize the American political process to bring attention to the cause of Guam. He successfully raised Guam's stature in American politics through his significant involvement and leadership in the re-election of President Clinton. But that effort resulted in a significant partisan blowback by the new Republican majority in Congress and a successful effort that scandalized his efforts painting them as an attempt for a quid pro quo for Guam, and lumped Guam campaign support with illegal foreign donors, the political controversy of that time. Up north, the CNMI had a flourishing and profitable garment industry that was under intense federal scrutiny for workplace abuses and human trafficking. The objective of the majority congressional Republicans was to celebrate the Northern Mariana Islands as the bastion of free market, without the inconveniences of federal minimum wage and labor standards. They compared the CNMI to Guam and described our island as an economic basket case because of the federal wage and workplace standards. The Democrats, with significant US labor support, countered. The CNMI's garment industry was scandalized, and free trade agreements eventually moved the garment business into Asia. Eventually, US minimum wage and federalization of CNMI immigration was imposed despite political and legal opposition. That unilateral action violated the CNMI's covenant agreement under its commonwealth with the United States. Pursuant to our local laws and mandates of our voters, Delegates Ben Blas and his successor, Delegate Robert Underwood, were obligated to introduce the Guam Commonwealth Act in the US Congress since its passage in Guam. As a young legislative assistant to former Congressman Underwood, I helped him plan and execute the congressional hearing on the proposed legislation at the end of 1997. Despite significant effort by Underwood, no further congressional action was taken, and efforts to address political status did not continue when Gutierrez and Underwood left political office in 2003. Of course, there had been irreconcilable differences between the government of Guam acting through the Commission on Self-Determination and later the Commission on Decolonization with the federal government from the get-go. In particular, the Guam voter mandate to pursue mutual consent, immigration control, and Chamorro self-determination could not clear legal hurdles and garner support from federal legal authorities. Despite political support from some political leaders in the Clinton administration and those in Congress, federal legal authorities prevailed. Congressional leadership deferred to the executive branch, and when no agreements could be reached, the Commonwealth effort was suspended with the election of new local leaders and their focus on Guam's recovery from Super Typhoon Pangsangwa on the heels of the Asian economic crisis and the reduction in force of the government of Guam through its early retirement program and severe budget cuts. With leadership and interest in decolonization by Guam's executive branch dissipated after Gutierrez's term for more than 8 years, political status pursuits remained dormant until Governor Eddie Baza-Calvo returned focus and resources to the cause, including the re-engagement with the United Nations Fourth Committee and the Special Committee on Decolonization. Calvo was committed to conducting a vote, and towards the end of his term became more enthusiastic in his resolve. Meanwhile, efforts had shifted to local legislative leaders who enacted laws meant to pursue unresolved objectives in the Guam Commonwealth Draft Act. The Guam Commission on Decolonization, a law sponsored by Senator Cristobal, was enacted and replaced the Guam Commission on Self-Determination and included a mandate for a Chamorro registry to be maintained by the Guam Election Commission and instructions for the conduct of another plebiscite. The pursuit of excess lands returns continued, and local legislation to mandate the transfer of any returned lands to a newly created Ancestral Lands Commission to address past injustices was implemented. Organic Act amendments were pursued and enacted to establish the Judiciary of Guam as a third separate and co-equal branch of government after local laws designated the Supreme Court of Guam as head of the branch were made. By the mid-2000s, many provisions of the Commonwealth Draft Act became outdated. While action to address federal regulatory matters continued, other issues remained unresolved. Lawsuits, federal legislation, the promulgation of federal rules and regulations, and other efforts were addressing shipping rules, airline routes, compact impact migration issues, government entitlements, as well as historical injustices such as land use and war reparations. While the desire to pursue Commonwealth status as an interim political status dissuade, the Commission on Decolonization continued its efforts over the next few years to prepare for the plebiscite. Expanded engagement by Guam civil society and its government with the United Nations continued, and the Department of Interior started providing funding opportunities to the Commission to advance its educational efforts. That is, until the Davis v. Guam decision upended the movement and legally prohibited the government of Guam from making any further pursuits of its statutory mandates with any government resources. This is where we find ourselves today. Most of you know, based on my past experience as the administrator of the courts of the judiciary, or my credentials as a fellow of the Institute for Court Management, that I am a staunch supporter and believer in the role of the third branch of government. I do believe that courts have the duty and authority to reverse bad law and to act in the interests of the public when reconsidering bad precedents in the interest of justice. That being said, the federal courts, which have successfully delivered justice through the enhancement and establishment of civil rights, environmental justice, and equity over time, have failed to consider and correct these injustices experienced by the people residing in the territories. These injustices were first instituted by the insular cases and the creation of the unincorporated territorial status we find ourselves in. Yet, as we know now, too, in recent years, the courts too have made a seismic shift, with recent key Supreme Court decisions reversing decades of settled law relating to women's rights and affirmative action, hallmark decisions in the civil rights arena. Now, as we continue to push the issue of our political status forward in the present, the context of this issue for our people has changed since the Guam Commonwealth era. It is clear that the level of injustice and political inequity has not been corrected, despite the legal and moral responsibility of the U.S. federal government to do so. Residents of Guam continue to serve the U.S. military in wars without voting representation in Congress or a vote for their commander-in-chief. Disabled and injured residents still cannot avail from certain entitlements, such as SSI. Domestic programs are withheld to Guamanians who want to reside on Guam rather than migrate to any of the 50 states. The current situation also designates that Guam remain outside of the customs zone of the United States, which on the flip side proves to be potentially rewarding to avoid U.S. tariffs on goods imported directly from foreign countries. The tug of war between our domestic identity and our exclusion from legal entitlements remain. It is true that our people have enjoyed the opportunities presented by the Organic Act through the establishment of our local system of government that almost wholly mirrors the functions of that akin to a state. This included the opportunity to elect our own governor, which was allowed in 1968 and effectuated in 1970, ending a long period of governance done through the appointment of high-ranking naval officials and political civilian appointees. We also were given the opportunity to have a delegate to Congress in 1972, providing our island a seat in the House of Representatives despite it being a non-voting one. Our island has also requested for changes to the Organic Act to allow for more political and civil mobility. They've also benefited from the granting of U.S. citizens for native-born residents for 75 years now. But there is no doubt that limitations to our potential and confines based on our political status as an unincorporated territory remain. With no voting representation in the House and our complete absence in the U.S. Senate, we remain at a disadvantage. A remaining obligation to the U.S. Congress, through the Treaty of Paris that facilitated Guam's cessation to the United States is the responsibility of the island's native inhabitants to be allowed to vote for their civil and political future. There is a leading and integral role for Guam's delegate in the U.S. House of Representatives as a member of the U.S. Congress. The role of the delegate, when it was provided to Guam, created an opportunity for our island to have a greater access to lobby for political parity. And in the past, Guam's delegates made a concerted effort to advance the Guam Commonwealth Act when that was a focus and mandate of our people. Today, our delegate's office must be leveraged to petition Congress to effectuate a process and a pathway of self-determination for the people of our island. It is imperative for us to remind ourselves that the issue of Guam's self-determination is an issue that is based on legitimate moral principles and values. Presenting this issue to Congress for resolution is the only way this issue can overcome the legal barriers imposed upon a political status plebiscite by U.S. law. But these are complicated times for sure, and the renewed attention to Guam's role in national defense and the narrative to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific means that the burden of peace is being shouldered once again by the people of Guam, and with supporting roles being played by other jurisdictions in the greater region. With this renewed interest, I believe we must be strategic in our desire to address matters that have limited our growth and the potential of our people. That being said, a great disruption has occurred in the United States and the world in January, with a seismic shift to the right in authority and philosophy. Political, academic, and social institutions are being reshaped, dismantled, and eliminated. Truth be told, there is a considerable amount of excitement on all sides of this new reality. There are those who believe the rule of law is being upended, while others believe that matters are being returned to tradition and greatness. Still others turn a blind eye to the political discourse if there is no economic benefit or harm to them. Another reality is a serious and legitimate concern over the growing and nefarious influence and tactics being performed by the Chinese Communist Party in our region and throughout the world. One must only look at the genocidal practices against the Uyghur and Tibetan peoples to see the indiscriminate violence happening in those communities. Small island states and developing countries are executing development agreements and incurring significant public debt for infrastructure projects and police activities with the Chinese Communist Party that seem to challenge and undermine their own territorial sovereignty. In the waters beyond ours, incursions into territorial waters of our neighbors are being perpetrated regularly, and resources are being stolen. The sophisticated use of social media to influence decision-making, elections, and public opinion, the launching of cyber attacks, and the race for supremacy in space and beyond are all areas that require our attention and should be taken of notice. So too is the need for sustainable development, territorial integrity, and the resilient public infrastructure in the face of expanded militarization, threats from sea level rise, poverty, and widespread drug abuse. These are the important issues we face, and sea level rise is the existential threat we face today and in the long term. And guess what? Sea level rise and climate change are not mitigated or avoided by political status or closed borders. Opinions, too, are being articulated by those at the highest levels of American politics to expand geographic and political authority over Greenland and the Panama Canal Zone in the interest of international security and fair trade. The need to crack down and eliminate fentanyl and other narcotics, and the priority for deportation of migrants and refugees flooding the United States are placing unprecedented challenges between the United States and its northern and southern neighbors. Tension abounds. Those too must be noticed and considered. As a people, we are confronted with a legacy and experience of being violently invaded and occupied during the Great War. With the vast majority of the greatest generation having passed the mantle of leadership to successive generations, we are challenged and burdened with the need to keep our people safe and to ensure that our island will never be left defensive nor exposed to the horrors that war and conflict bring to a peaceful people. Should the issue of our U.S. citizenship surface as an important part of this discussion, I don't believe that the citizenship question is a nuance to these discussions. Rather, it is a dominant issue tied to entitlements, security, and for some, identity. The examination of citizenship is even more important these days, given the new legal issues arising from the deportation methods being performed on students, protesters, permanent residents, and even minor children born in the United States. Examinations of different paths should also be pursued, including the legal entitlements of the freely associated states, given the reduction and downturn in U.S. foreign aid and agreements. What will the credibility of the United States be in the Pacific with the elimination of its pledges to support climate resilience and other mitigation measures? The unique relationship between Niue and the Cook Islands with New Zealand is another case to examine, given the dual citizenship that New Zealand has afforded to Niueans and Cook Islanders. Could this be a model to be pursued? Could this be an evolution of our thinking for our future? What about Guam's role with the Northern Mariana Islands? Should we aspire to unify the government with our northern cousins and neighbors? Will the socio-economic condition improve for our jurisdictions? What about land ownership? Does the CNMI covenant survive, or do we become a part of that covenant with the United States? What of the combined natural and ocean resources, or the factors of ethnic demography and the role and recognition of other indigenous peoples? Guam finds itself in a unique position. It is now celebrated as an integral part of the U.S. homeland when referenced by top political and military leaders. It is the transportation, communications, and economic center and connector for the Micronesian region to the world. As the leaders of Guam venture past Micronesia with interest to engage and influence the greater Pacific, how do we prepare our government officials to engage? Clearly, without Guam and even the CNMI and American Samoa, the Pacific Island Forum's 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent would not be complete. It is inconceivable that the Chamorros, Carolinians, and Samoans from Pago Pago are missing from the table when regional issues are confronted. What about the status of the Chamorro people? Is it our obligation to show interest in the status and well-being of the Chamorro people living abroad and part of the diaspora? How about those displaced by health concerns or military service? What of those that left for economic opportunity? Have they exercised self-determination? How about the non-Chamorros who have made Guam home and helped to establish the Guamanian identity? What is their legal and moral role in status discussions and decolonization? What role does international law and how does the Universal Declaration on Human Rights affect these groups? Regardless of the path that is to be pursued, the Commission on Decolonization must remain active as an educational arm for our community, providing a wider awareness of the need to rectify our inadequate political status and promoting the three options that will provide our island a full measure of self-governance. It must be at the core of this dialogue. Our administration and the current board of the Commission, chaired by Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, remain committed to supporting the educational functions of the Commission, as it is vitally important for our island to be educated of their rights and options before them in a political status plebiscite. A function of the Commission that is an essential part of its public information program is the Fanhita Conference Series, the fourth of which is being facilitated by the Commission today and tomorrow. Focus of today's conference proceedings is the utilization of local engagement strategies and opportunities to advance our island's quest for self-determination, decolonization, and the full measure of self-government. Our island's quest has a long and storied history guided by great civic and political figures, grassroots movements, and everyday people that continues to strongly persist to the present day. It is important for all of us to recognize and honor those that have come before us, who have worked tirelessly to move the needle forward for our collective benefit. It is equally important for us to learn from them as well. We must heed the call to bring our island forward, to recognize the limitations and constraints of our current territorial political status, and to be active participants in the evolution of the political status that we will choose. Let's continue to work on this together. As descendants of the best navigators in the world, I'm sure we will get to our destination safely and flourish. We know no other way. Let's lead together. Thank you, and Sidus Masi.